Good evening. It is good to see Brother and Sister Pettingill back with us tonight. They've had a long bout with the you call it? Muck, okay. We all have different names for it. That's probably the most appropriate that I've heard in a while. But so glad you're able to be with us. My daughter is not able to be with us. She's sick, and some other members of her family are not feeling well tonight. And certainly want to remember her in our prayers. I need to, the deacons who are present, I need to meet with you when we dismiss this evening. We have just a brief couple of things I want to cover with you before we get out of here. So please remind me about that at the end of the service, and we'll make sure and have our meeting just be very brief, and then we'll try to get the show on the road and get out of here. In chapter 12 of 2 Samuel, and we'll begin at verse 13 in just a moment. We touched on this briefly last week, but I want to pick up where we left off. One of the points I tried to make in our study last week was that the likelihood that David's carrying on with Bathsheba was truly secret and not widely known is very difficult to imagine. There were just too many people. And when you imagine the palace of the king and the servants that were dispatched to retrieve her, not only to bring her to his bedchamber, to have this relationship with her, but then when she sent word back to him that she was with child, there are a number of couriers already involved in this scenario. The likelihood that they kept their mouths shut about it was not that great. So I think we're safe in assuming that this was pretty widespread. I mean, that's the kind of gossip that people talk about. If you doubt that, you can just watch the news today and read about our president's own lawyer being raided, his office, and they're looking for dirt of a sexual scandal, perhaps, that they can tie to a political scandal. So that kind of thing goes on, and certainly will continue to go on as long as there are those in high authority and in positions of authority. So the likelihood that it wasn't known is just not that great. So, that being my take on the situation, it makes the role of Nathan the prophet here all the more remarkable. We typically, I know people in the pew typically look at preachers and say, well, he runs his mouth, he enjoys talking, and he doesn't mind being in front of crowds, and he's fearless, he doesn't care, whatever, he's a jerk. I mean, you think all kinds of things about your preacher, I'm sure. But to speak from the perspective of a preacher, I'll just say, for my sake anyway, there are many times when situations arise, sins need to be addressed and preached against, and it's not pleasant, and it's a very difficult thing, and it's never something that one wants to do. I've alienated a lot of people in my life, which is probably the worst thing I've ever suffered. I've never had to confront a king who could at will simply strike me dead or have me struck dead. That would be a whole other matter. I do remember when Samuel, we've already studied him, of course, in 1 Samuel, was told to go and speak to Eli, his father figure and priest, his mentor, and many other things you could say about Eli. But nevertheless, he had a very strong message for him. And that was not an easy thing for him to do, but he certainly did that. Paul encouraged Timothy in his letters, in both 1 and 2 Timothy, in essence, not only explicitly, but by strong inference, to simply preach the word in season and out of season, when it's wanted, when it's not wanted, when it's popular, when it's not popular, when people think highly of it, when they don't think so highly of it, whatever, you preach the word. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And so I think we take for granted the human side of preachers. And so when Nathan comes to David, and he's telling David this story about a rich man and what had happened, we have no idea how David's going to respond. David was a bloody man, and I'm saying that because that's how God described him. And he was a bloody man, you do recall. And this is just one of many instances that we could recall, but when Saul was offering his daughter's hand in marriage for 100 foreskin to the Philistines, you can have her, he killed 200 of them. So he just doubled the offer. It makes you kind of think David just enjoyed killing people. And so he was just a bloody man. And so when Nathan came to him and he's confronting him with this sin, you had to know in the back of his mind, this may be my last sermon. And so he's fearless. And he goes before David, not knowing how he's going to respond. But verse 13 summarizes everything we need to know about this bloody man. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. So, did he sin? Yes. Did he acknowledge his wrong? Yes. And notice where he squarely places the one he sinned against. Did he sin against Uriah? Did he sin against Bathsheba? Did he sin against all of Jerusalem as their king? Did he sin against his own body? But when he says, I've sinned, the first and foremost thought that came to his mind was, I've sinned against the Lord. And so immediately, Nathan is able to respond somewhat positively, but with great fear and trepidation, I'm sure, as he announces that he's not going to be a happy camper for the rest of his life. The sword will never depart from your house for what you've done. But nevertheless, he was forgiven, and that's primarily what David was concerned with. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it brings to mind, what God told us in 1 John, if we sin and confess it, that he is faithful and just to forgive us.
Absolutely.
And it's a good example right there in verse 13.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
He made the confession, and God did forgive him.
So if you sin more than once, though, that's it. You're done. You can't sin more than once. Or only 7 times in a day. Right? Well, the Lord answered that question to us. How oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times. And the Lord said what?
7 times.
And that's a perfect number, I think, isn't it?
For the 491st time.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, you've gone over your limit, 491, okay. But aren't you thankful for mercy? Now, Nathan said to David, the Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. Well, he's the king. Why would he fear dying? Why would David be afraid to die?
The law said he should die.
Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10, the man who commits adultery with another man's wife. He who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. You know, when you think about the Old Testament and we hear Hebrews chapter 2, every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. And we think about Nadab and Abihu, Leviticus 10. We think about Numbers 20 and the man that was out picking up sticks on the Sabbath day, stoned to death. That's a horrible way to die, by the way. Without shedding a tear. We think of the harsh, exacting manner in which the law was enforced, the law of Moses, that is. And so did David deserve to die? But he did not die, which suggests that God is merciful, even under the old law. And I'm saying that because I know some people have this mistaken view that the God of the Old Testament was harsh and exacting and mean-spirited and intolerant, but the God of the New Testament is loving and kind and patient and graceful and forgiving. God of the Old Testament is the very same God of the New Testament. There's absolutely no difference. The only difference is the priesthood has been changed, and yes, the law has been changed. God himself and his nature has not changed. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so if you're hoping and betting on mercy, well, so was David. and so must we all. But because, however, verse 14, by this deed you've given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. Again, that confirms what I was suggesting already, doesn't it? That this was widely known. And so Nathan is saying your crime is not just that you committed adultery and that you committed murder, but that it's known, and now that it's known, you brought shame and reproach upon the name of God. So it's compounded his sin. The child who is born to you shall surely die. Do not ask me the question, why did God take the life of this innocent child? I do not have an answer to that question. Especially in light of the next chapter, or later rather, I should say in this chapter, when Solomon is born to this very couple. I'm simply at a loss. I have no theory, no idea, no suggestion. It's one of those times when you read something and you're like, I don't know. I don't understand it. I know that God did this. It was part of the judgment. Maybe because the child is innocent, the child's really not going to be harmed by not having to suffer through this life and having to endure this life, and this sweet, precious baby is going to go straight to heaven, which is far better than having to live through and endure this life and possibly be lost. So you could look at it that way and then turn it around and say, the greatest tragedy was for David because this was his child. And so David is the one suffering, as we will see here in the next few verses. Any comments or questions about David's confession and Nathan's confrontation? Nathan departed to his house. The Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore to David and became ill. David therefore pleaded with God for the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. So the elders of his house arose and went to him to raise him up from the ground. But he would not, nor did he eat food with them. Now, before we continue, some commentators suggest that the translation here is not very accurate, that it probably would be better to say that David was laying on the palace floor. And the reasoning they have for saying that rather than ground is not necessarily the language in the Hebrew, but the context and who David was. And commentators are suggesting that perhaps we've mistranslated it because David was in his palace and therefore would not be on the ground, and this was not a proper place for a king to be. I think all of such reasoning is absurd.
King James said earth.
The earth, which I think is probably the most accurate way of saying this. I don't care who you are or how powerful you are. When you realize what you've done and how sorry you are, and you have your own child's life hanging in the balance, are you really concerned about whether it's a clean floor, a dirty floor, the dirt, pine straw, or what? It doesn't make any difference. David's overwhelmed with his own sense of guilt and with grief because here he's losing a child. It's a side note, but I don't know, stuff like that bothered me. It's kind of like I noticed in our book, we've gone back to the old language in some of the songs. Some of the modern hymn books, I noticed in the last 25, 30 years, have cleaned up the language in some of our songs. What's that song with the refrain, for such a worm as I? Which song is that? What's that? Rock and roll. Huh? At the cross, yeah, thank you. Where I first saw the light, yeah. For such a worm as I was what the original writer had in mind, what he wrote. But all the modern hymn books that we have, our brethren have written that off for such a one as I. We just don't like the idea of worm. It's actually a biblical reference from the book of Psalms, but I noticed in our book, written by some of our more ultra-conservative brethren, that they've gone back to the old language, and I think that's preferable. And anyway, there's no reason why we should think so highly of ourselves that when we do wrong, that we're any better than a worm, because even inspired penmen have described themselves that way. Okay, so the elders of his house arose, verse 17, and went to him to raise him up from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the seventh day it came to pass that the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, "Indeed, while the child was alive, we spoke to him, and he would not heed our voice. How can we tell him that the child is dead? He may do some harm." When David saw that his servants were whispering, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said to his servants, "Is the child dead?" And they said, "He is dead." So David arose from the ground, washed and anointed himself, changed his clothes, and he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. He went to his own house, and when he requested, they set food before him, and he ate. His servants said to him, "What is this that you've done? You fasted and wept for the child while he was alive, but when the child died, you arose and ate food." He said, "While the child was alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, 'Who can tell whether the Lord will be gracious to me that the child may live?' But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me." It's interesting because you really, of course, I'm sure we've all attended funerals and we've probably heard this passage referenced many times. I've used it myself on a number of occasions during funerals and so on and so forth, and even leading up to the funeral. But it does say a lot of things to us. And like I said, the servants of David, I think, are right in being a little bit curious. I mean, while he's still alive, you're fasting, and you're not eating anything, and you're praying, and you're laying on the ground or the earth, and now he's dead, and you're back to business. The way David was looking at it, and he even explained it this way: well, while the child was alive, I was doing everything I could do. I was doing everything I could do. But now that he's dead, what more could David do for him? Nothing. I mean, whatever is going to happen, his fate is sealed. It's done. It's over. We're not going to be like Whoopi Goldberg and come back, from the grave and haunt people and raise pennies on the door and, weird stuff like that. That's not going to happen. When we die and we depart this body, we go somewhere. And I want to talk about that with you for just a moment. It is fascinating because David said while he was alive, I did all of those things, because David wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a physician. But he was a parent. And sometimes as a parent, all you can do for your child is pray for them. That's the best you can do, but sometimes that's all you can do for your child. If that's all you can do, then that's what you need to do, is to pray for the life of your child, the health and well-being of your child. But once the child is gone, what do you do? It's fascinating to me because David was so assured that when he died, he was going to be wherever that child was. That's blessed assurance, isn't it? To know you can live your life that way. Know that when you die, you're going to be in the hands of God, hands of a merciful God, but you're going to be in the hands of God. And so David was very confident that I'm going to go to be with him. Now, she's not here tonight, and I'm sure if she were, she'd probably be asking me right now. Sister Porter has asked me this question probably 100 times or more since I've known her. But when we die, she says, will we know each other? Or when we get to heaven, will we recognize each other? And a lot of preachers will say many times, well, I don't think we can answer that question. I beg to differ. I don't believe there's anything about our identity that we're going to lose. I may lose my bald-headedness. I may lose my spare tire. I may lose a lot of other things, I hope, because this is a corruptible body. And the one I'm going to inherit is an incorruptible body. And this one's mortal, and that one will be an immortal body. So I'm hoping for bigger, better things, in the other world. But who am I? And who are you? And what do you know about us? Have you ever called somebody on the phone? In fact, I had a call from Ann Smith about, an hour and a half ago. Hello, Brother Gray, do you know who this is? I knew exactly who it was. How did I know who that was? I recognized her voice. That's the sound of her voice. But the way she talked, the things she talked about, it was familiar. What are y'all laughing about back there? Cut it out.
She said caller ID.
Oh. No, I didn't. No. I don't have her in my phone, thank you. It was not caller ID. That would have been the case, but. I would have said that had I been sitting there. Well, look, you're forgiven, my son, for confessing.
I guess I'm still from the old school.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that one either right off the bat, but it's pretty good. Who are we? I mean, I think that's really what we're getting at here is, how do you recognize somebody? Do you recognize them because they wear the same clothes all the time, or because they, look a certain way, or is it who they are? Who are you? And I recognize your character, your personality, your voice cadence. Things about, is that going to be lost? Will I carry this jerk-like personality to heaven? I don't know. I hope. I know my sister's thinking, you're going to be a punk in heaven. Well, I hope. I know what you're thinking. I know.
You said, what did you say, jerk? I said, I thought punk.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're thinking. Yes, sir?
The rich man recognized Abraham and Lazarus.
And as far as I know, he never met him. Now, that's what gets me. Okay, on the Mount of Transfiguration, we don't know all the details. Maybe when Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus, he said, hey, Peter, James, and John, this is Moses and this is Elijah. He may have officially introduced them. I don't know. I just know that when they were there, they knew who they were. Now, how did they know who they were?
They certainly didn't have a picture of them.
Yeah, they didn't have caller ID. They didn't have any way of knowing who these people were. But somehow they knew them. And when you think about the question raised to Jesus by the Sadducees about marriage, not divorce, but marriage and then marriage and then marriage, and whose wife shall she be, for they all had her, in heaven. And he responded by quoting God speaking to Moses. I am the God of who?
Abraham.
And so Abraham still had his identity as, and Isaac and Jacob. They still had their identity, and they still existed. They were still alive. I am, not I was, but I am the God. And Abraham had been dead 400 years or more. So when God made that statement to Moses. But I am the God of Abraham. And so Abraham was. And I submit to you, Abraham is. And Abraham will always be. And so will Isaac, and so will Jacob, and so will David. And so will this baby who's not named. They will always be. And so we will always be. And we will always have our identity. I believe that this case can be made over and over again, and I want to explore some of that with you. Look with me to Luke chapter 16. I know some of you in the class probably have studied this before. You have people suggest different things about Luke 16, verse 19, by the way, where we start. But and people say, well, this isn't factual. This is mere, what's the term they use? Parable. It's a parable that Jesus is using. Okay, well, first of all, there's not a whole lot about it that seems like or reads like a parable. But even if it's a parable, the Lord's not going to share misleading information or deceptive information when he speaks to us about such things, even if he's just making it up on the fly. If he's just making up these names and making up this scenario. If he's just making it up, even if he is, he's not going to make up something that doesn't represent the truth. So whether these names, Lazarus and this rich man, were just made up characters to make a point in a lesson, Maybe, but even if that's true, and I never have understood why someone would argue, well, it's just a parable, therefore we can just be dismissive and not accept it. I don't buy that, because even if it were just, and I don't believe that it is, I'm not saying that it is, I'm saying, but even if you believe that, it doesn't change the import of what we're going to suggest here tonight based on this. But again, the fact that there's names mentioned here and specifics, it just doesn't read like a parable, doesn't sound like a parable. It sounds like something Jesus is saying, I've witnessed and I've seen because I'm deity and I can tell you about such things. But yeah, Herman?
I agree with you on that, because I know that whenever Jesus told other parables, he used, a relationship or what the person was, what their job title was or whatever. Usually he never called them by name.
Yeah.
But this is the only one that we have that actually has two names in it.
Or he would say, the kingdom of heaven is like. It's similar to, and he would give some description of it, but he didn't say this is like. He just told us about these two men. Yes.
Yeah, the Bible also teaches that Hades is also the equivalent to the Old Testament Sheol,
Yes.
which is also equivalent to Abraham's bosom.
Okay. Well, perhaps Sheol or Hades is just the realm of the dead. And that's what we're about to read about, the realm of the dead. And there are two compartments, apparently, there's a division in the realm of the dead, the unseen world of the dead, and there's a good side and there's a bad side, and there's a great gulf between those two sides, and they can't cross over one to the other.
In times preceding the cross of Christ,
Yes.
Hades was a place that detained both the righteous and the unrighteous.
Well, when Jesus died on the cross, he went to Hades. In fact, he quotes the Psalm, Peter quotes the Psalm, your soul will not leave my soul in Hades, nor allow my flesh to see corruption. In fact, the King James says not leave my soul in hell, but we understand the term hell to refer to that bad side of Hades. Yes.
He told the thief on the cross,
Today you will be with me in paradise. Exactly right. That's fascinating you bringing that up, because it kind of ties in what we're going with tonight. You're getting ahead of me, but that's okay, because he did say that to the man who's dying with him. You're going to be with me in paradise. But they put Jesus in the tomb. Did they? Did Jesus go in the tomb? I thought he went to paradise. His body went to. So what is your body? It's exactly what it is. It's a tabernacle. It's a tent. And so, again, I'm going back to the body thing. Is this who I am? Or am I possessing this? Is this shrouding me? You understand what I'm saying? So we're spiritual beings. But we're encapsulated in flesh and blood. But this is just a temporary dwelling place. I could be chopped up in a wood chipper and my body parts burned in a fire. What's left of me, my ashes thrown all over the place. And somehow, the creator of the universe is going to find all those parts and put me back together one day and make my body better than it is now. I don't know how God can do that, but honestly, I don't know how God can make millions and billions of galaxies in a single afternoon either. I don't know how God could do that, but he did that. And he can do that too. Our God's an awesome God, by the way. I haven't mentioned it in a while, but I'll mention it again tonight. He can do a marvelous thing. Yes, sir?
remember back in the Old Testament, all through the Old Testament saints are always told when they passed away that the Bible says they were gathered
To their people. That's very good observation.
to their people.
Absolutely.
That tells you they were gathered to this abode, this spiritual abode. They were separated by a great gulf.
So when Isaac died, did he go to his daddy's bosom?
I think he went to this place called Abraham's bosom, also in the Greek.
And so did he recognize, hey, Daddy?
Pardon?
Did he say, hey, Daddy?
You might have.
Well, how did they greet each other? Did he go and kiss him on the cheek like they do in that part of the world? I mean,
They may have.
you know, I don't know why they wouldn't. Did he not recognize him? So when we know someone we love that's passed away and we know they're safe with the Lord, do we not fully expect one day to see them again and to be with them again? Is that not part of our hope? Was that not part of the concern of the Thessalonians in 1 Thessalonians 4? Paul was saying to those Thessalonians, I'm speaking now in the reverse of it, but if we just die and that's it, What about those that have already preceded us in death? Don't worry. They're okay. We'll be reunited with them one day. And that's the whole point, isn't it? And yeah, we're going to, I believe, retain our own identity. And we're going to recognizing it. Yes, ma'am?
This has always been on my mind. No tears are supposed to be in heaven. Okay, say.
What if somebody you love is not there?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to that question.
God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes.
All I can say is what he just said. God will wipe away our tears. How he's going to do that, I don't know. Maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe for the ones in heaven. Now, the ones in hell, they're not going to forget their stuff. I know that for a fact. We're about to read about that, but...
It's kind of curious that, that while Lazarus was on his side, he wasn't able to speak, or he wouldn't.
Well, he didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything.
But Lazarus, Herman, was a slave in his lifetime. And he's over on the other side now. And what's the rich man demanding that his former slave do? He's still treating him like he did. You see what I'm saying about your personality, your nature? This rich man that's in hell is still expecting his servant to go there and dip his finger in cold water.
He also said,
And what did the slave say? Nothing. What would a slave say to his master? Nothing. He's still saying nothing. I don't know. It's just interesting, isn't it, to see that dynamic. You had a comment?
and also said to Abraham, let me go warn my 5 brothers about this Christ.
Oh, he remembered he had family, yeah.
Lest they also come here.
Exactly. Let's read it. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day, but there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, who was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with the crumb which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. So it was, the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And being in torments in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. He cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I'm tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted and you are tormented. And besides all this, between us and you there is a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those pass from there rather pass to us. Then he said, I beg you therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, lest they also come to this place of torment. Abraham said to him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. He said, No, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded though one rise from the dead. And Jesus was exactly right about that, because he did rise from the dead. And some of these very people hearing this were still trying to silence the voice of truth and reason. So he did rise from the dead, and they still didn't believe. They still wouldn't accept it. And not long after this, or right around this time, he raised Lazarus, a man by that very name, from the dead. And some of the Jews said, let's kill him again, because if we let him keep living, then the whole world's going to go after him. I don't understand that. I can't get my mind around it. I never have understood that and never will. I don't understand a lot of things about human nature, but that's one thing I'll just never be able to. I just can't figure out how people can be that far removed from reality. But nevertheless, it's fascinating when you think about 2 men that die. One of them is very rich, one of them very poor, one of them's in good health, one's not in such good health. And that's true of us, isn't it? People, model of health, sometimes just fall over dead. Sometimes people suffer for years with maladies and then finally die. We're all going to die. Sometimes some quick, some slow, some painless, some painful, some in their sleep, some eyes wide open. We're going to die. And it doesn't matter if we're rich or poor or black or white or Hispanic or Oriental or whatever. We're all going to die. And the question is, when we die, what happens to us? And our brother here has rightly pointed out, the day Jesus died, he said to someone dying with him, where I'm going to go, you're going with me. That's really comforting.
But the word death in several places in the New Testament, the word death it's talking about the soul.
Well, yeah.
Which the word of God divides the soul and the spirit of death.
Now, James tells us about the body without the spirit is dead, being alone, yes. Now, Paul said in Philippians 1:21, for me to live is Christ, and what? That's really, we don't have to say, let's just sit there and think about that for a minute. Did Paul mean that? Was he seriously saying to die is gain? I'm better off to die?
There's one other thing I think about. The word death in all what's used throughout the New Testament. The word death, die, dying, dead, never means separation of life or cessation of life.
The cessation of existence, that's correct. You might be separated from your body, but you're still,
The soul.
you still exist. Whoever lives and believes in me shall what? And so interesting you keep referring to the New Testament. There's a new phrase that comes up in the New Testament that sheds light on this. And it's not dead, but sleep. And so they're sleeping. So have you ever, it's been a few times in the last 5 or 6 years that I felt dead when I slept. I mean, I'd go to sleep and the next day I know my alarm's going off, which that happened to me the other day. It scared me. I thought, what is that noise? I mean, I forgot what it sounded like. I'm serious. I thought, what is that? It really irritated me. And it took me a while to figure out where I was and what was going on. I looked up, and there was this noise next to me, and I had to get my phone and try to figure out how to, my hands were asleep, and I'm like, I couldn't hold my phone and trying to put it. It's frustrating, to get old, but when you're asleep like that, or like, if you're under anesthesia, you don't exist. It's almost like you're gone. And then all of a sudden, somebody's slapping you in the face. Oh, here I am. And so, I think it's probably wrong for us to assume that when we die, it's like you're asleep, because when you're asleep, if you're not dreaming, it's like you're gone. Like your life had just stopped. But today you will be with me in paradise. Was he?
I believe so.
Well, the Lord said he would be. If the Lord said something's going to happen, it's going to happen. So, yeah, that's where he went. And so for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. For if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit from my labor, yet what I shall choose I cannot tell, for I am hard pressed between the two, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, to remain in the flesh is more needful for you. So, people ask all the time, when you die, where do you go? Well, as a Christian, from this text, what can you say categorically?
To be absent from the bodies to be present with the Lord.
Well, we'll look at 2 Corinthians. We know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed with our habitation, which is from heaven. If indeed, having been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up by life. Now, he who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has also given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So we're always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. So now you know why he said to die is gain, right? For we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. And now we know why it's better to die in the Lord. Any other questions or comments? We've got about 8 minutes. Yes, sir.
I'm probably saying this, everybody knows already. However, I just want to make sure that we do, is that where he was going was not purgatory. So we
No.
have an opportunity to change things. Your fate is made when you
Yeah.
die.
Well, that's what Luke 16 tells us.
Right.
You can't come over here and we can't go over there.
Right, so, it's just some people have kind of put this secondary deal that, okay, well, this is a way that we can make, that does not say that anywhere in the scriptures. That is just a.
But you can raise a lot of money for the church if you do that.
Oh, sure, yeah, especially if you get a chance to do better later on, so.
Yeah, if you can convince people that if you go to purgatory and if you're burning and you're in
You
pain,
can have other people pray for you.
other people can not just pray for you but give money to the priest. then we can get you out of purgatory a lot faster because we can pull strings because we got connections. I know you think I'm making that up, don't you? It sounds crazy, doesn't it? No, I'm serious. St. Peter's Basilica today stands as a monument to, countless millions of dollars in silver and gold that were raised throughout Europe, telling people exactly what I just said to you. And there were some of them really good at it, the minute the coin hits the coffer, a soul flies from purgatory. I'm like, wow. I can't get fast enough, And not only that, but you don't ever have to go to purgatory if you just pay enough money, pay up front. And you give enough to the church, and you're good to go. It's like a gold card. You can just...
On the prepaid system.
It's a prepaid system. You prepay, and you can do whatever you want. Live out whatever debased life you want to live from now on because you're good to go. You done paid your way. Yeah. Yes, sir?
In Ecclesiastes, the writer says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do with all your might. For in the grave where thou goest, there is no knowledge, etc., etc.
Yes, sir. So you're referring to the book of Ecclesiastes. Interesting that you bring that up. I did a lecture on Ecclesiastes at Florida School of Preaching a few years ago, and it's always been a fascinating piece of literature to me because if you look at Ecclesiastes in the light in which it's written, what the writer is doing is he's describing everything that's under the sun. It's a reference. It's a Hebrew idiom meaning everything that happens in this world. In other words, this physical existence of ours. And he's speaking in a purely physical perspective. He's speaking as though there is no afterlife, as though there is no God, and it's a very dismal view of life. And so whatever you're going to do it now because where you're going, nothing you can do there. Well, I don't know what we do when we get to paradise, honestly. We say we're going to sing, and we do know that they sing in heaven from the book of Revelation. What do they do in torment other than cry out for relief? I don't know, but I think it would be a mistake to conclude that Ecclesiastes is describing in an accurate sense what we're discussing here. I think if you read it in that light, you're going to miss the point. The point in Ecclesiastes is to simply describe a godless view of life. And so he also speaks of man being no better than the beast, because as the beast dies, so man dies. But we know that's not exactly the case because, yeah, we do die because we have a physical body just like a dog has a physical body, and the dog can be run over and I can be run over, and we both can die in the same way, as a matter of fact. Our bodies, at least, can cease to function, and so we give up this tent. But unlike the animals, there's something that's different about us. And that different thing about us, and that's something that the ecclesiastical writer is not concerned with in his book. Until he gets to the end, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. In other words, everything you're describing is vanity of vanity. It's really a very depressing view of life. That's right. He does say that, and he acknowledges the truth there. It's not like he's denying the truth. But overall, his message is that this is the view of life without God, without any purpose. It's just, what would be the point in living? And it's a really good question to ask. I'm getting sidetracked. It's a good question to ask our secular friends. Why are you so concerned about whatever you're concerned about? Because your life is absolutely meaningless. Just like, Rover, you're going to die one day, and who cares? Because you're just here for a little while. And so life doesn't matter. But if you believe that there's a God, and we do, we know there's a God, then your life has purpose, it has meaning, and you're not just an animal. You're created in the image and likeness of God, which distinguishes you from all the other lower creatures. Yes?
Getting back to when we die,
Mm-hmm.
when we leave this place, and if we're going to be with God, what the scripture says happens, that's
Yes.
faithful. Are we under the concept of still, or the surrounding of time? Or would we be in the same situation,
I don't know.
1,000 years is a day, and a day is 1,000 years. Would we be into that?
That's a good question, because the souls of those that were beheaded for the testament of Jesus Christ were under the altar of the Lord and crying, "How long, O Lord, will you not avenge our blood?" Now, maybe it's hard to say when you're reading apocryphal literature. You say, well, this part's literal and that part's, not literal. But again, those souls did seem to be cognizant, aware that time is passing and nothing seemed to be happening. Or is he simply speaking accommodatively? I don't think so. I think he's just saying that even those individuals are going to ask, maybe they're still aware of time passing here. They may not be affected by it as much, but they're still aware that it's happening, wondering, I see this guy still living. But then again, do people in heaven know what's going on earth? I don't know.
Rich man knew what had been going on about him.
He did.
Five brethren back on earth.
But how did Abraham know all this stuff? Well, he was a prophet, so maybe he's still inspired even in heaven. I don't know. Or maybe we just hear the angels coming back from their daily duties, watching after people and talking, sitting around the coffee shop talking. And you won't believe what Jane did today. I almost pulled out in front of a car and had to stop her or whatever.
He knew it.
I don't know.
The man informed him of it. He just acknowledged what he
Yeah.
informed him of.
All that's fascinating. I don't know. I mean,
Time was created when creation happened.
yeah,
The evening and the
it's part of this world,
24-hour rotation around the sun.
and we're in it. Yeah.
Turn on the actor.
All right. Well, pardon the pun, we survived this conversation. I'm glad we did. And but I do think it's fascinating to consider Paul's words. To die is gain, and when we really start believing that, I think everything about our lives now will be enriched if we truly believe that.
Well, David knew that, and back where we were starting, is that, number one, he knew that God had promised that John would die. And he was prostrate before God to take and, to ask his mercy about changing his mind, basically. And then when he did die, which is exactly what God said was going to happen, well, then he knows he's going to heaven. So there's no need for him to be sad. He knew what the outcome was going to be in the beginning. So basically, that was the beginning to him. So why be sad? That's what he was saying. His days of agony were over then in that particular case. And it's kind of strange because that's when ours starts. That's kind of separates the two.
Exactly. And David had to live with that the rest of his life. Yeah. $837 or $836. That's a true story. That's what got Martin Luther so riled up about this thing. Yeah. $836 in your songbook. 836. It's good to see you tonight. Thank you. We have financial reports available if you would like to see them. I'll have them available for you up here on the Lord's table. So please be sure and pick up your copy of a financial report before you leave tonight. Deacons. Calling all deacons. I need to meet briefly with you, and I'm emphasizing briefly because we have a lot we need to do when we dismiss tonight, but I do have some very urgent deacon material matters that I need to discuss with you. I meet down front over here, and maybe the kids won't scream so loud tonight we can hear each other speak, but we will need to meet just briefly. Ladies' Night Out will be tomorrow night at American Pie Pizzeria in Carrollton at 6:30. Also, the ladies are having a work time and devotional this Friday starting at 10 o'clock. And this, of course, to prepare the bags and things for the Bible Bowl which comes up Saturday morning. We desperately need all of us, all of our members, to be here for Bible Bowl. We have young people that are preparing and that need our encouragement. Bible Bowl is a fun time. It's just really fascinating and fun and informative and encouraging to these young people. We need to be here to support them and let them know how much we care about them. And besides, I think Lisa and Herman have extra Chick-fil-A sandwiches, so you get a free lunch out of it, right? Okay, that's what we want to hear. Don't forget, this Friday evening, April the 13th, which is Friday the 13th, we'll have a quiet time of prayer here at the building. Brother Michael Weaver is going to be here to pray with you, for you, take requests, or just have a quiet place to pray. That'll be this Friday evening from 4 to 6. Good time to pray for our Bible Bowl and the things surrounding it. Also, regarding the Bible Bowl, we need, and I'm begging desperate help, especially those with strong backs, to help move the podium and the furniture from the stage, and we'll set up our tables and try to get the main part of it set up tonight before we leave here. So if you're able to do that, please stay, and hopefully the deacon will be through with their meeting very shortly, and we can all pitch in, and it won't take but just a few moments. Don't forget the Widowhood Luncheon will be the 25th on Wednesday, and we've expanded the widow and widowers from area churches to join us. And so anyone interested in helping with the luncheon or preparation, please see Deanna Johnson to sign up to help in this matter. Ann Smith is asking us to pray for her and for James, and certainly want to remember them in a very special way tonight. Also, the McGuires are still not feeling well and need our prayers. Al Gaddis, is good to see you here tonight, brother. And we've been praying for you and glad you're able to be back with us. Also, the Pettingills are here with us tonight, and we're so glad they're over the and able to be with us. My daughter Lydia has the or whatever, and went to see the doctor today and don't know exactly what's ailing her. That could be strep, we don't know, but want to remember Lydia and her family, please, in your prayers. Anyone else we need to mention on our prayer list tonight? Number 836 will be our song of invitation and encouragement. We were studying about David and the loss of his child, and from that we looked at Luke 16, and a simple observation was made, and that is that when we live in this world as human beings, we're going to die. The question is whether we're going to die in the Lord and prepared to go and be with the Lord, which is far better, or we're going to die without God and without hope. And really the choice is ours. God gave us the freedom to choose and has extended the invitation to us. And that invitation is to embrace the gift of life offered in his Son through gospel obedience, believing that he is the Son of God, repenting of our sins, confessing him before others, and being buried in the grave of baptism, to bury the old man of sin, to rise to walk in newness of life. Or if you need to respond and be restored to your first love and rightful place among the people of God, that's your need, please make that known while together we stand as we sing.
What will you do with Jesus?